Hello everyone. So today we're doing a different kind of video because in my last couple of videos I've noticed that a few of you have been asking about study tips and how I've been studying when I was a medical student. So this video is not going to be a vlog, but it's going to be one of those videos where I explain how I used to study and what I think is a good method of studying. Alright, so the first thing I'd like you to do is go to your phone, make sure that you click on the Do Not Disturb button. That's the number one tip I have for studying. Alright, so I usually start with just putting a bit of light. So for example, this is one of my decorative lights. Sometimes I like to use a candle instead of this, just to make the desk look a bit nice, just to get me in the mood. I also like to use highlighters a lot, so this is me setting up my highlighters. I also make sure I have a few colorful pens because I like to write with color. It's how I remember things. And of course, not to forget the pencils because I still use them. I'm a big fan of sticky notes. I will show you in this video how I use my sticky notes. These are some of mine. I've had those throughout the years since I was a medical student and even now after I graduated from medical school. These are just a few nice tabs that help you separate the chapters in your books or your folders, and I really like them because they keep me organized. I like to use these yellow stickers. I only stick them where something is important and I need to memorize it, and so we're just adding them here. I found these nice sticky notes in Muji. They're basically Monday to Sunday weekly and monthly planners. I use them quite often and they're just a part of my daily habits. Adding a ruler and just a few more sticky notes because I'm very big on these. Just adding a bit of tape because I do use it in my studying and in my planning. And here's my sharpener and the rubber. Alright, let's have a look at the study notes. So study notes are very important for active recall. It's really essential that you start organizing your time on how you use your study notes. There's a really nice system that you can use actually to start studying the study cards. And if you start to divide them into 5 boxes, and it is basically that you need 5 boxes. Your initial set of flashcards you put in the first box. This is the box that you study every day. Each card that you get right, you can move to the second box. The second box is one that you practice every other day. And the third box is the one that you practice once a week. Fourth box is if you practice something every other week. And the fifth box is when you practice something once a month. Personally, I never did the one that's practiced once a month. I think that's a bit too much. I like to maximum study something every 2 weeks just to make sure that I'm remembering it. Here's an example of some of my study cards. For example, here you can see that I was studying the brachial plexus, and at the top right corner you can see that I added one of the yellow stickers, which means that this is something really important and it's something that I have to make sure that I memorize. Here's another study card about the hip fracture management. You can see that here I'm using a bit of a flow diagram. I always find flow diagrams to be very helpful. Here's an example of me preparing some study cards. This is another one. I'm using a marker and a black pen. Here are some actual study cards that I used in 2019, and this is me preparing some study cards. In this picture, you can see that I have a few cards put in a box that are waiting for review. So let's have a look at some of the notes that I wrote in my notebook. This was when I was preparing for one of my exams after medical school. Here you can see that I use quite a lot of highlighting, a lot of drawing, and it basically just works for me. Maybe it doesn't work for you, maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but you won't know unless you try it. This is one of the ways where I write notes in an A4 paper. I like to split my papers in half. I find it so much easier to memorize and have everything consolidated in one paper. For example, here you can see that I've got the triceps muscle just in one place. And I have forearm flexors in just less than half a page. It's very easy to memorize this way. If you look at the median nerve, I've got the LOAF mnemonic, which makes it very easy for me to memorize the motor supply of that nerve. So if you, whatever you're studying, if you're studying medicine or anything else, use mnemonics, use colors, use different sections of a paper just to make it work for you basically. So you can see these orange lines that are dividing the paper into sections, and it's all the information that I need to memorize for specific muscles, for example. It basically makes it very easy for me to memorize, and it's so much easier to revise from a single A4 sheet. Here you can see that I also make sure I ask myself questions. I basically split the paper in half. On the left side, I ask myself questions. On the right side, I write the answer. And as you can see, this yellow sticky note is basically hiding the answers. So the way I am studying is that I am reading the question, making sure I answer it before I reveal the answer. And then if I get it right, then perfect. If not, then it's something that I definitely have to revise. All right, let's have a look at how I use some of my sticky notes. Sometimes you can do a drawing which is a bit more detailed. For example, I have this patient. This patient has complications of burns, so I drew a person and I drew some fire under them. And where the fire is, I basically wrote down complications of burns. If you have a look at the person themselves, they look like they're screaming and they're in shock. So this person is shocked because fire, burns, causes hypovolemic shock. Then we have their lungs and their kidneys in the blue color. So their lungs are affected because they will have ARDS, and their kidneys will say, nope, I don't want to work anymore, and they go to renal failure. Then you have these evil looking things on the left side. This is basically sepsis, so this person's body is being attacked. Then you have these two red blood dots for hemolysis and coagulopathy. If you think of this picture as a story, if you imagine this person and you just memorize this sticky note, you will remember the complications of burns. This works on any concept you have. Just whatever you have, you can write down a simple little story that fits into a sticky note and you can start memorizing it. The only way for you to draw something like this is if you understand it. So understanding what you're studying is really essential. So in this picture, you can see in the background that I've got the sticky notes just stuck in the iMac, and it just makes it very easy access. Alright, so let's be real. We all come from different backgrounds. You don't need a fancy desk, you don't need a candle, you don't need fancy lights or something that looks very nice on your desk or for it to have an aesthetic look. Sometimes all you need is just your tea, your notebook, and a pencil and a highlighter. Please don't watch videos and think, oh, this is what my desk is supposed to look like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to study, and these are all the things that I need to buy. No, not really. All you need is just a bit of peace and quiet, your notebook, and whatever works for you is basically what you should do. Here's another one where you can see the tea, bit of cucumber, and in the iPad I've got questions on the left side, and on the right side I'm basically writing a summary. This is the same study session, just maybe 1 or 2 hours after, looking at my notes basically. And here you can see my textbook right in front of me. I've got the sticky notes as usual, and I've got my study cards right here that have been filled, and I've got the blank ones right here on the right side. You can notice that I'm quite precise in the way I organize my things, because I feel like the way you start studying is really important, that your desk needs to be clean and organized. This is a picture of the desk from basically another angle. Whenever I find a window, I make sure I'm just sitting right in front of it. In 5th year, I started finding YouTube videos which had a study vibe, like a library, rain sounds and all these things. And I would just open them on my laptop and just make sure I'm not distracted, basically. Now let's talk about the ambience of studying. It doesn't matter where you study, as long as it's a good, quiet area that works for you. So you can study in front of a window, you can be in your bedroom, you can basically have any type of desk. You can be in a hostel. For example, this is me in the hostel. If you have a look at this one, this is the table that we had in the hostel. Alright, where you study, how much does it matter? It's really important. So, all you have to make sure is that you're studying in a very good environment which is not causing you any distraction. Personally, I have basically tried to study in multiple places because I get bored very easily. For example, this is me studying in Costa. This is me studying in the kitchen table. It works for me. So this is the highlighter key that I was talking about earlier. You can see here that I've written that the pink one is important, blue is a mnemonic, and yellow is a random highlight. I stuck with that for some time and I found it to be super useful. Of course, you don't have to stick to this exact color key, but I'm just telling you what worked for me. Sometimes you don't want to study at your table, and that's okay. Just go find somewhere else and study there. Caffeine. Alright, so I personally think caffeine is essential, as long as you don't overdo it. You will find lots of pictures of me just drinking lots and lots of coffee. Personally, I think that tea and coffee have helped me a lot in my studying. I know that this is not exactly a healthy habit, and that you should drink, something more useful or get a better source of caffeine. But this is what worked for me when I was a medical student, and it's what worked for me after. As long as you're not overdoing it and you're not stuffing your body with caffeine, then you should be okay. Alright, so coming to the topic of self-motivation. That's up to you. And I'll tell you why. What's your occupation? You're a student. Unless you've already graduated and you are, working part-time or working full-time and you've got exams, then your job is a student, a full-time student. And you have to treat it that way. It doesn't matter if you are a middle school student, a high school student, or a university or college student. This is your job right now, and you basically have to own up to it. And even if many people come to you and try to motivate you and try to convince you that you need to study, no one is going to really convince you except yourself. Sometimes it's really hard to start, and you read through your notes and you just can't get them. Sometimes you hate yourself for studying. And sometimes you're just not in the mood to start and you're just staring at your papers. And that's okay. It doesn't matter how many people you tell that you have to study. If you're not actively studying and if you're not getting the grades you need to get, you've just wasted your time. But you just have to remember that good things come to those who wait. And you just have to be in the mood, no matter what. You have to get yourself and convince yourself that this is for you. This is your future. I know that many people have done this. I know I'm guilty of it too, which is when we start to write down a study timetable, we look at the days of the month. For example, if today is the 24th, I would say, oh, on the 1st of next month, I will start. As long as you've started, you've already achieved a very big step, and it's one of the hardest steps to achieve. Be honest with yourself about how you use your time. So, if you're wasting your time scrolling on social media, that's all going to backfire in the end. And you just have to make sure that you're using your time productively. You have to work smart now. The time to play will come later. And at the end of the day, you just have to make sure you take a deep breath and you will get through it. And it's completely up to you and how much effort you put in now to what kind of job you will have in the future.